Donald Trump is not happy with Russian killings. Well, this makes it two of us and 40 million Ukrainians, by the way. Another topic is Russian peace in all its glory. Mass Russian missile drone attack on Kiev kills 12, injures more 87. Well, again, and Trump was not quite happy about it. I just loved that sentence. And as senior lecturer at the Royal Air Force College and a former military intelligence officer, Dr. Frank Ledwidge is with us. Tonight we discuss what the European Union can do in terms of its own security amidst growing Russian danger and what it can't, actually. Good afternoon, my name is Henry Keane and we are UATV English. English-speaking Ukrainian state media in constant persuasion to deliver hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. Vladimir, stop! I'm not happy with the Russian strikes on Kiev. They're not necessary and very bad timing, Trump said on Truth Social, platform addressing the Russian leader by his first name. First time, actually. Wow. We have been saying that since 2014, when Putin annexed Crimea, Mr. President. We understand Russia launched the deadly attack amidst your efforts to broker a peace deal in Ukraine and Kiev, and that is frustrating. We have learned that your, Mr. President, diplomatic outreach has largely favored Russia, with your peace proposal offering de jure recognition of Russia's control over Crimea, a ban on Ukraine's membership in NATO, and no sanctions for Russia. We understand, Mr. President, you want closer economic cooperation, with the murder still. After President Volodymyr Zelensky ruled out formally ceding the occupied peninsula of Crimea to Russia, you, Mr. President, criticized him at length and called his position harmful to the peace negotiations. Well, this is what foreign newspaper like German Die Welt writes about your own peace efforts, Mr. President, a direct quote. Donald Trump's so-called peace plan is a bluff. In reality, this is a capitulation plan that not only violates Ukrainian interests, it also has consequences for Europe by encouraging Moscow to engage in more imperialist wars. Europe must oppose the plan. By recognizing Crimea as Russia, the United States is in practice recognizing the violent change of borders in Europe. In this logic, Russia only needs to conquer more and more areas in Eastern Europe in order to gradually achieve international recognition for its conquests that violate international law. This is therefore not a sustainable peace solution as the Trump administration claims, but rather an invitation to Moscow to continue its colonialist, expansionist policy. The American proposal violates both current international law and the painful lessons of World War II. They suggest that one must set limits early on for dictatorships that are expanding aggressively. Then Hitler's Nazi Germany, today Putin's authoritarian regime, because otherwise the aggressor will interpret restraint as weakness and start new wars of aggression. Trump's unilateral plan also shows that the United States is no longer interested in preserving the old world order, nor in leading the free world. Instead, it seems that Trump wants membership in the club of revisionist superpowers that want to divide the world amongst themselves. Well, we in Ukraine have largely learned, Mr. President, that your peace efforts stand on shaky ground, though you might not see it for now, but it is. As the world is obviously not under your control solely, no matter what your envoys are saying, the Gulf of America only exists on your red MAGA caps, and that's it. Maybe you will learn that when that MAGA cap will be the only thing left for you of that enormous power that you obviously are abusing now, siding with your natural adversary who spits in your face openly. And the only thing you say about it is that the timing is not right. While Russia kills 12 and injures 87 others, including 6 children in Kyiv just yesterday. 31 people remain in hospital as Kyiv mayor Vitaly Klitschko confirms. A series of explosions rocked Kyiv around 1 at night local time on April 24th. More explosions were later heard around 4 a.m. local time. Russia launched attack drones as well as cruise and ballistic missiles, in total more than 200 air means of death. Of course, as usual, residential area were hit, so not only cars and commercial buildings were ruined, but people were murdered. Some officials described the attack as Russian peace in all its glory. The mass attack came just hours after the Kremlin demanded Ukraine's full recognition of Russia's claim over 4 Ukrainian oblasts. It partially occupies now neutral status for Ukraine and an end to all Western military support. Earlier on April 23rd, US President Donald Trump suggested that President Volodymyr Zelensky was the main obstacle to peace in Ukraine. Well, let's have some time talking about it, shall we? Calling a spade a spade. No emotions at all, just pure facts. So, again, pure math. Russia launches a deadly 200-piece combined missile and Iranian drones attack targeting civilian areas in Ukraine. And we know as a fact that every Russian missile has Western components in it. So Ukrainians are murdered every day in Ukraine, just crossing the street maybe, by exactly that, the result of Western-Russian business collaboration, a deal where the Western part is to fail to prevent the circumvention of their own sanctions and to sell those missiles components to Russia. And Russian part is, well, just being Russia, a terrorist country that kills people, and that's what it does. And that is what it did yesterday. And not just in Kyiv, all over Ukraine. Odessa, Kharkiv, Sumy, Zhytomyr, Dnipropetrovsk, Kharkiv, Poltava, Khmelnytsky, Zaporizhia Oblast were also targeted in the massive combined strike, though Kyiv was hit the hardest indeed. And no one doubts there will be more attacks and more death and destruction in Ukraine, caused by Russian missiles with Western components in them. And this killing business thing is happening before our Ukrainian very eyes for 3 years in a row by now. Just a routine, really. But yesterday, something truly extraordinary happened. That happens not every day and does not sound as routine as another dozen of Ukrainian children killed on the streets. Nothing special, right? But yesterday, in response to the attack, Poland's Air Force scrambled Allied, I say it again, Allied fighter jets to protect the country's own airspace from missiles that may stray into Polish territory. And that's actually what literally stuns me. Let me explain myself here. Russia sends more than 200 missiles and drones at Kyiv, one of the deadliest attacks ever. And in response, Poland scrambles Allied fighter jets to down these stray missiles, meaning that missiles that were initially targeted to hit Ukrainian cities but could have somehow lost their way and hit Polish cities instead. It looks legit, and it is. You have to defend your airspace, right? There's one thing in this regard that I have a really, really hard time in understanding. From the perspective of those common glorious European values being proclaimed so loudly at every occasion, meeting, gathering, and summit, how on earth one have been filtering these 200 missiles and drones coming at Ukraine so only to down stray ones and pass through those that will actually kill civilians and children in Ukraine? Yeah, that seems to be going the proper way. Straight at Kyiv center, it will kill 10 people sleeping in their beds, but all good, NATO borders are fine, so let it pass. It seems clear to me that we all, in Europe and in America, are pretending that no one has anything to do with this terror unleashed on Ukraine by Russia, but Russia. But that is not exactly the case, isn't it? Russia is just Russia, doing what it always has been doing, nothing new, waging wars and destroying nations, while Europe encourages Russia to do so by this outrageous filtering Russian missiles. Europe encourages Russian terror by not even so passively standing up for its loudly proclaimed European ideals. As from a military potential perspective, every EU country is absolutely militarily capable of scrambling its allied jets not only to hunt down stray missiles, but shooting down all of Russian missiles flying in Europe's direction, all of them, and period. And by doing so, Europe is killing no one. It's not setting its foot on the ground, yet delivers a severe blow to Russian Tsar's war chest by making him spending billions in vain. My question to Europe is, why is it not happening? And as an attempt to avoid rhetorical questions to be asked here, we talk with someone who maybe knows it, the whole thing, as he's senior lecturer at the Royal Air Force College and a former military intelligence officer, Dr. Frank Ledwidge. Good afternoon, sir. Thank you so very much for finding time.
Good afternoon. Privilege and pleasure.
The pleasure is all mine, as always. Well, my first question is, after yesterday's Russia sent more than 200 missiles and drones altogether as a combined attack at Kiev, one of the deadliest attacks ever, Poland scrambled Allied fighter jets to down stray missiles. So these are the missiles that are supposed to hit Ukraine, but then stray somehow and was a danger to Polish cities. But only stray missiles. So from a military potential perspective, I think that every EU country is absolutely militarily capable of scrambling its Allied jets, not only to hunt solely down stray missiles, but actually shooting down all the Russian missiles, flying in Europe's direction, all of them, in period. And it is just not happening. Why?
Okay, well, first of all, we need to get one thing straight, that 80% of NATO's combat power, 80% of NATO's combat power comes from the United States. European powers have spent the last 40 years spending their money on social security, health, and all the other nice things, including my own country, rather than establishing serious defense. And I include Poland in that until very recently. Europe will not come to Ukraine's rescue because, first of all, it doesn't have the political will, which we'll come to. Secondly, and more importantly, it doesn't have the capability of doing so.
Doesn't.
The only the glue that holds NATO together is the United States. Now, that's not just its fighter forces, its anti-aircraft units, its suppression of enemy air defense units, capability really only possessed by the United States. That's the ability, which, by the way, is being refined by Ukraine at the moment, with F-16s, but won't be properly refined because they don't have the equipment, experience, or decades of personnel development needed. All that is provided by the US. Now, if that's withdrawn or isn't there, the air capability of Europe to do pretty much anything except maybe defend its some countries' airspace is limited at best.
So are you saying that without America, there is no NATO, just that, straightforward?
Effectively, military NATO is
well, it is military alliance, isn't it?
States for that's right, yeah. The military effectiveness of NATO is utterly dependent on the US. Now, as I say, it's not just for the kinetic capabilities, missiles, tanks, guns, etc. Europe has some of that, but it's the connective capabilities, communications, command, control, the space reconnaissance assets, the early warning, ISTAR, intelligence, surveillance, target acquisition, reconnaissance, the ability to destroy or erode enemy air defenses. All of that is possessed by the US, not by Europe. And that's why it's going to take between half a decade and a decade, despite all the rhetoric, for Europe to come up with anything reasonably comparative, let alone similar to what they have now. In the event the US withdraw or diminish their contribution, which, given the threat from China to them in the West Pacific, is quite likely.
But is it happening? I mean, all the coalition of the willing, mini NATO, whatever that means. Do you believe this is Europe is awake? It's woken now. It's something is going on, or not?
Yeah, I think it is. there are serious headwinds, though, and again, those are political. So I talked about the kinetic capabilities, which is the guns, tanks, etc., but also political will, and there's no doubt that's present, at least on X, in France, Germany, the UK. It's less present in Italy, Spain. Italy's very capable military power and a massive space and industrial defence power. Less so in Italy, Spain, and what we used to call Club Med. Sorry, for Mediterranean people, that's what the title or the nickname used to be. There's less of that capability available there, and a less political will. But to come to your point, getting the announcements from X onto the front line will depend on finances, on the ability to cohere the political will that's being evident, that seems to be evident at the moment, into practical cooperation, into trade-offs, and into actually financing the supply chains, the industrial strategies that will be needed to back up any effective serious European deterrent capability over the next half decade. And it will take that at least, at minimum.
Right. Well, Dr. Ledwidge, well, all right, let me ask the question from, say, from the other side of the moon, if you allow me. Do you believe that there are any red lines that should not be crossed in terms of Russia? What I mean, if let's say Poland just put down not only stray missiles, but the missiles that were actually flying to kill civilians in Ukraine, what would have happened?
Well, Poland has. Well, let's take Poland as an example, assuming it has the capability to down missiles over Ukraine, which it doesn't at the moment, or perhaps over Lviv. As far as Lviv, it may well have capability without actually crossing the border, with some of its longer-range anti-aircraft assets, or indeed its air force, may have that capability. So let's assume it has that capability.
Right.
Look, the issue there, as you well know, first of all, Poland won't do that. Poland is probably the last country in Europe who's going to do it, because they have said in terms, we will not be fighting in Ukraine. French and British, a little bit more forward-leaning, but then they're faced with, they don't have some of the capabilities that Poland has. In other words, serious, deployable anti-aircraft systems. So let's assume they had that capability. Would this be a red line? The answer is, of course, would be a very strong pink line, if not a red one. Russia's told us in terms that it would consider any NATO engagement, or any NATO powers engagement, active engagement, beyond actually what's there now, and we know there is NATO engagement there now, but overt engagement of air power, of aircraft or anti-air units, to be active involvement in the war, with the obvious consequences that they would be open, those nations, to retaliation, say the Russians, in that event. Now, I don't think the political will, never mind the practicality, political will is there in France, UK, Germany for that to take place. Right. Poland has already said it's not going to do it.
Right. Well, no unity in union. Another union is NATO. But you already partially answered that question. So NATO is literally what it is Article 5. So attack on one is an attack on all. It is the core principle, the spine, if I may. So my question, if Putin invades, say, all right, let's say my native Latvia, Baltic states, tomorrow, will you think NATO reacts accordingly to Article 5, as it is now, with Trump's administration, with Poland on one side, French, German, everyone has its own opinions and whatever. But now it happens. It is happening. Putin invades Baltic states. What will be, let's speculate on what can be NATO's reaction after that.
Well, in broad, I've no doubt whatsoever that yes, NATO, in European NATO, at the very least, would absolutely come to Latvia's aid, or Estonia, or Lithuania for that matter, or Poland, should that take place. I've no doubt at all. I would say, by the way, as you well know much better than me, that Latvia is very much in the front row of that, because of its Russian minority in the south down
Absolutely.
there, similar to Estonia, of course. So no, I've no doubt at all. And the reason for that too, practically, of course, there are already NATO tripwire forces, and the purpose of that is, let's be blunt about it, they would take casualties very early on. There would be a political will to at the very least, a political will to react to those casualties, and that would include the US. I mean, there are 1,000 US troops in Lithuania alone, let alone throughout the rest of the Baltics. So I suspect the US, yes, would get involved. And look, we know a little bit about President Trump. He's a changeable fellow, and should American troops be killed by Russians or indeed other NATO forces, I've no doubt the Americans will get involved too. But yeah, I'm pretty confident in the integrity of Article 5 right now. Yeah, I think so. I think Article 5 is pretty solid. Certainly in the UK, France, Germany, the sort of Finland, needless to say, Sweden, again, needless to say.
Right.
And those are very robust. That's a very robust gathering on its own. But if you fold into that United States, then you have pretty much a decisive response.
Ukraine is to be turned into steel porcupine. I love this saying, just as Ursula von der Leyen said that, if I'm not mistaken. So is it already happening? I mean, Europe is rearming, so all the let's say old weaponry, whatever it is, can come to Ukraine to make it a steel porcupine. Am I right or not?
Yes, that's again. Look, again, that's on X. Mrs. von der Leyen. Just I want to caveat this, but Mrs. von der Leyen has a very poor record as defense minister in Germany for translating rhetoric into reality. Right. The German armed forces were rarely at a lower ebb than under her purview. But let's assume that the rest of Europe can get itself together.
Right.
The war that's going on now, sadly, as you well know, is a war of attrition that requires mass. And as defence officials in the West are beginning to realise that just scrapping your old gear and forgetting about it or selling it off to the third world is probably not the best option. Rather, it would be much better to keep it in storage to use for your second echelon reserves in the event you need them, as we did in the past. So let's hope we've learned that lesson. As for making Ukraine a porcupine, this is a term that's been applied several times recently, and notably in Taiwan. It's a wise precaution to take, and it's a deterrent precaution in the event of peace in Ukraine. Yes, to arm Ukraine to the teeth and ensure that it is an adequate deterrent, not just for Ukraine itself, but of course as a tripwire, and forgive me for the term, for the rest of Europe in the event that the threat subsists, which it will. Which it will,
right. Well, to Ukraine itself, last question for tonight. Dr. Ledwidge, Ukraine is capable of recreating, let's put it that way, its nuclear deterrence potential, like in 3 or 5 years maybe. Do you believe it should?
No, absolutely not. I don't believe in nuclear proliferation. I think we've got enough nuclear weapons in the world. And whether it's Iran, Israel, Pakistan, India, North Korea, none of these countries that are illegal nuclear countries, there are 5 legal countries, none of them have improved the stability in their regions, and I don't think Ukraine should add to that mess. We can only see today the risks posed now by an India-Pakistan conflict, which is looming on the horizon. And that would be a conflict, by the way, that would not be confined, or the results of which would not be confined to India and Pakistan, it would be global. So we must hope nothing happens there. And the reason we have to hope nothing happens is because both of these countries are armed to the teeth with nuclear weapons. I don't think the proliferation is the answer at all. Rather more, it would be far better to ensure that Ukraine has a deterrence in the form of strong, efficient, well-trained, well-formed, and well-prepared armed forces, which I think, of course, it will in the future. But that needs to be, as I've said for years, and I'm sure many other people, especially in Ukraine, understand. But we have to start planning for that now. We also have to start planning for the reconstruction of Ukraine, and part of that is making sure that Ukraine's armed forces are ready to deter into the medium and long term.
Absolutely.
Not, though, with nuclear weapons.
Perfect answer. And a great experience. And thank you so very much for your precious time and for your time with us. Thank you and goodbye. We talk soon.
Thanks very much. Thank you. My pleasure anytime, as always.
Goodbye.
Cheers. Bye now.
Cheers. Bye. Well, that seems to be it for tonight. My name is Henry Keane, and we are UATV English, an English-speaking Ukrainian state media in a constant persuasion to deliver hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. In return, we ask to share, like, and comment. Your voice matters, as it in turn helps Ukrainian voice to be heard globally. So stay safe and hope to talk to you very soon. Goodbye.